Daehai and Kim stood in the observation deck of Nexus Station and watched the stars. Behind him, the massive doors to the council chamber would open in 10 minutes. 20 years. 20 years since humanity had earned their seat at this table. And still, they were treated like children who wandered into a room. Full of adults, he adjusted his formal uniform and checked his tablet one more time. The charges were absurd. His aide, a young woman named Haiwan, stood nearby with their documentation files. She looked nervous. "They won't listen," she said quietly. "They never do." Daehai smiled without humor. "I know. But we follow procedure anyway." The Galactic Council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of species had representatives here, arranged in a vast circular arena that rose up toward the domed ceiling. At the center sat the Chancellor's platform, elevated above everyone else. Chancellor Vrex of the Maltharian Empire waited there now, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled delegates with obvious satisfaction. Humans occupied a small section near the back. Junior members always did. The session began with the usual formalities. 3 minor disputes were settled quickly. Then Vrex's voice boomed through the chamber's translation system. "The Council recognizes the matter of human territorial violations in the Outer Rim. Ambassador Kim approached the center." Daehai walked down the long aisle to the speaking platform. Every eye in the chamber followed him. He could feel their judgment, their dismissal. To them, humans were newcomers who had barely learned to leave their own solar system when the Council found them. "Ambassador Kim," Vrex began, his tone already condescending. "Your species has established colonies in the Outer Rim Sector 739. This sector contains ancient structures belonging to Council member species. You are not authorized to enter this space." Daehai activated his presentation. Holographic images appeared in the air above him, showing the derelict structures his people had found. They were magnificent, even in their decay. Massive stations and orbital platforms that had been abandoned for thousands of years. "Chancellor, the structures were derelict when we arrived 3 years ago. Our scans showed no active signals, no maintenance, no habitation. According to Council law, unclaimed space is open for settlement after a 2-year observation period. We followed all protocols." A Maltharian delegate stood immediately. "Those structures belong to the Maltharian Empire. They have belonged to us for 5,000 years. Then why did you abandon them?" Daehai asked calmly. The chamber erupted in angry chatter. Vrex allowed it to continue for a moment before calling for silence. "The structures were not abandoned," another delegate said, this one from the Veskin Collective. "They were placed in reserve status. We have documentation proving our claim." Daehai had expected this. He pulled up another file. These documents were filed 6 weeks ago, after human colonies were already established. If these structures were so important, why did no one claim them for 3,000 years? How dare you question the Council's historical records? Vrex's voice shook the chamber. Humans have been members for barely 2 decades. You do not have the standing to challenge decisions made by elder species. Outside the station, Captain Jiwoo Park sat in the command chair of the UN's Indomitable and watched the proceedings on her screen. The Council allowed observers, but human military vessels had to maintain a respectful distance. Around the station, she counted 17 Council warships. Far too many for a simple diplomatic hearing. "Ma'am, should we move to a defensive position?" her tactical officer asked. "No, not yet. But keep scanning those ships. I want to know if any of them power up weapons." Back in the chamber, Daehai continued his presentation. He showed the investment humanity had made in the Outer Rim. 5 colony ships, 15,000 settlers, 3 restored stations, now housing research facilities, medical centers, and agricultural platforms. The colonies were thriving. "We've spent 5 years building these communities," Daehai said. "We've restored structures that were rotting in space. We've brought life back to dead systems. And now, suddenly, multiple species claim ownership?" Vrex leaned forward. "The Council has deliberated on this matter. The ruling is unanimous. Humanity must surrender all structures and territories in Sector 739 immediately. Additionally, you will pay reparations of 500 million credits to the affected species. Finally, due to this violation, humanity's status in the Council will be reduced to probationary. You will lose voting rights and must accept Council oversight of all military operations. The chamber fell silent. Daehyun stood very still. Around him, he could see the satisfaction on the faces of dozens of delegates. This was what they wanted. To put humans in their place, to remind them that they were the youngest, weakest species here. Probationary status? Daehyun repeated slowly. That would make humanity subordinate to Council authority in all matters. Correct, Vrex said. It is the consequence of your actions. You have two choices, Ambassador. Accept these terms, or face immediate economic sanctions and military action. The Council's patience with human arrogance has reached its limit.
Ow.
On the Indomitable, Giwu watched Daehyun's face on the screen. She knew that look. She had served with him for years before he became an ambassador. He was calculating, thinking through every possible response. Chancellor Daehyun said carefully, these terms would effectively strip humanity of sovereignty. We would become a subject species, not members. You are in no position to negotiate, another delegate said, this one from the Torgoth Assembly. Your fleet is small. Your economy is developing. You need the Council far more than we need you. Daehyun looked around the chamber. Hundreds of species, and almost all of them agreed with this judgment. They truly believed humanity should submit, that it was the natural order of things. I need to consult with my government, Daehyun said finally. Vrex smiled, showing far too many teeth. Of course. We are reasonable. You have 4 hours to contact Earth and return with your acceptance. The Council will reconvene then. Adian bowed slightly and walked back up the aisle. Hewan joined him immediately. They planned this, she whispered. All of it. The charges, the timing, everything, I know, Daehyun said. Get me a secure channel to President Choi, priority 1. As they left the chamber, Daehyun glanced back once. Vrex was already speaking with other delegates, laughing at something. They thought this was over. They thought humanity would roll over and accept whatever terms they dictated. For hours. And for hours, Daehyun would return to that chamber and give them humanity's answer. He just needed to find out what that answer would be. On the Indomitable, Jiwoo received new orders from Fleet Command. Defensive positions authorized. She gave the commands quietly, and her ship began moving into a better tactical formation. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. Captain, her communications officer, said, I'm picking up encrypted chatter between the Council ships. They're coordinating something. Keep monitoring. Record everything. Gyu leaned back in her chair. And get me a direct line to the ambassador. I think he needs to know what's happening out here. For hours. Everything would change in 4 hours. President Taeyang Choi looked at the faces on his screen and felt the weight of every decision humanity had ever made pressing down on him. The Emergency Council had assembled in 12 minutes. Around the table sat the most important people in human government. Military leaders, intelligence directors, economic advisors, and diplomatic experts. Tell me again, Taeyang said quietly. Tell me exactly what they're demanding. Daehyun's image on the screen was tired but steady. They want us to abandon 5 years of work in the Outer Rim. 15,000 colonists would have to evacuate. We'd lose 3 operational stations and all the infrastructure we've built. The reparations alone would bankrupt our expansion budget for the next decade. And the probationary status? Admiral Haijin Song asked from her seat. It means Council oversight on everything. Our military movements, our trade agreements, our research projects. We'd need permission to expand beyond our current borders. Essentially, we'd become a protectorate, not a member. The room was silent for a moment. Then Dr. Soo-Jin Lee, the chief xenosociologist, spoke up. They're testing us. They've been testing us since we joined. Every species goes through this apparently, but most cave immediately. The ones who don't usually get crushed as an example. Taeyang asked bluntly. Admiral Haijin pulled up tactical data on the central display. The Council has significant military advantages. Their ships are older, but numerous. Combined fleet strength estimates put them at roughly 40 times our current naval capacity. In a straight fight, we'd lose. But Taeyang pressed. He could hear the unspoken word in her tone. But they haven't fought a real war in over 2,000 years. Their tactics are outdated. Their crews have no combat experience. And their unified command structure exists only on paper. We've been analyzing their exercises. They're sloppy, overconfident, and they assume technology alone will win battles. Minister of Economics Dong Wu added his perspective. Financially, accepting their terms would be devastating. The reparations would require us to divert resources from critical infrastructure. We'd have to close down research programs, delay ship construction, possibly even reduce our defensive capabilities. And that's before we factor in the loss of the Outer Rim colonies. What about the colonies themselves? Someone asked. Already responding, Daehyun said. I've received 47 messages in the last hour. The colonists are asking permission to resist. They don't want to leave. They've built lives there. Taeyang rubbed his temples. This was impossible. Every logical analysis said humanity should accept the terms, take the hit, and survive. But something in him rebelled at the idea. His species didn't survive ice ages, plagues, and countless wars by bowing to bullies. Min-Shu, he said, looking at the intelligence director, you've been quiet. What aren't you telling me? Min-Soo Kang had been staring at his tablet for the last 10 minutes. Now he looked up, and his expression was grim. We intercepted communications between 6 council species 2 weeks ago. Encrypted, but we broke it. Sir, they've already divided human space among themselves. The Outer Rim was just the opening move. Within 5 years, they plan to claim Sol System has strategic importance and demand council administration of Earth itself. The room exploded into angry voices. Taeyang held up a hand for silence. Show me. Min-Soo displayed the communications. It was all there, laid out in clinical detail. Which species would get which human colonies. How they'd justify each annexation. The Outer Rim hearing was theater, a precedent they could point to later. Once humanity accepted subordinate status, the rest would follow naturally. They're annexing us piece by piece, Dr. Sujin said quietly, and making us pay for the privilege. Admiral Haijin leaned forward. Mr. President, I need to say something unpopular. We can't win a military confrontation with the Council. But we don't need to. We just need to make it cost more than they're willing to pay. Explain. The Council's unity is a facade. We've been monitoring their internal politics for years. They barely tolerate each other. The only thing holding them together is the system they've built. A hierarchy that benefits the elder species at everyone else's expense. If that system cracks, the whole thing might collapse. How do we crack it? Taeyang asked. Daehyun's image shifted. I have an idea. It's dramatic, probably insane, and will burn every bridge we've built in the galaxy. I'm listening. We have 5 years of data on Council operations. Trade agreements that favor elder species. Resource extraction from protectorates that amounts to theft. Military protection rackets. Dozens of minor species being exploited. The Council maintains its image as a benevolent organization, but the reality is very different. You want to expose them, Taeyang said. Not just expose. Broadcast everything on public channels across the entire galaxy. Every species, member or not, sees exactly what the Council really is. Then we walk away. Withdraw from the organization entirely, close our borders, handle our own affairs. The room erupted again. Half the Council thought it was brilliant. The other half thought it was suicide. They'll declare war, the defense minister said. Maybe, Daehyun replied. But with what unity? Once we broadcast that information, species will turn on each other. Old grievances will resurface. The minor species will see that they're being used. The whole system depends on everyone believing it's legitimate. Dr. Sujin was nodding slowly. It's a psychological operation. We're not attacking their military. We're attacking their credibility. And credibility is the only thing holding the Council together. Taeyang stood and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the lights of the city. Billions of people going about their lives, unaware that in the next few hours, their president might make a decision that would change humanity's future forever. If we do this, he said slowly, there's no going back. We'll be alone in the galaxy. No allies, no protection, no safety net. We're already alone, Admiral Hyjin said. We just didn't realize it yet. Taeyong turned back to the council. Vote. Do we accept the council's terms, or do we walk away? The vote was quick. 12-3 in favor of withdrawal. Taeyong looked at Daehin's image. You have your authorization, Ambassador? Burn it all down. Daehin nodded. I'll need time to compile the broadcast package. 2 hours should be enough. You have 3? Make it count. As the council meeting ended, people began filing out. Admiral Hyjin stayed behind. Sir, I need to move the fleet into position. If this goes wrong, we'll need to evacuate our people quickly. Do it. But Hyjin? Make sure the fleet is visible. I want the council to see that we're ready. She smiled slightly. Visible. Got it. Alone in his office, Taeyong pulled up a picture of the Outer Rim colonies. 15,000 people who'd left everything to build a new life. They deserved better than being bargaining chips in someone else's power game. His communication console beeped. It was his daughter Biora, who worked in the diplomatic corps. Dad, I heard about the council meeting. Are we really doing this? Yes, he said simply. Good. It's about time someone stood up to them. After she disconnected, Taeyong sat in the darkness and thought about what courage really meant. It wasn't the absence of fear. It was looking at an impossible situation and choosing to stand anyway in 3 hours. Daehin would walk back into that chamber, and the galaxy would learn that humanity knew how to walk away. The council chamber filled quickly. Delegates took their seats with barely concealed eagerness. They were here to watch humanity submit. Some had even placed bets on how quickly the human ambassador would fold. Chancellor Vrex sat on his elevated platform and surveyed the chamber with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding as planned. In a few minutes, humanity would accept their place in the galactic order. The other species would see what happened to those who challenged the system. It was almost boring how predictable it all was. Daehin Kim entered the chamber alone. No aides, no advisors. Just himself and a small data chip in his pocket. He walked down the aisle with steady steps, and something about his expression made several delegates sit up straighter. He didn't look defeated. He looked calm. Ambassador Kim, Vrex began, his tone magnanimous now. Have you consulted with your government? Are you prepared to accept the council's terms? I am prepared to give you humanity's response, Daehin said. He reached the center platform and stopped. Before I do, however, I'd like to address the full council. That is irregular, Vrex said, frowning. Nevertheless, I request it. Surely the council can grant a departing member one final courtesy. That caused murmurs. Departing. Vrex's 4 eyes narrowed, but he gestured for Daehin to proceed. Daehin pulled out his data chip and held it up. In the past 20 years, humanity has been proud to serve on this council. We believed in its mission. We believed in galactic cooperation, mutual benefit, and the rule of law. He paused. We were naive, Ambassador. Vrex's voice held. Warning now. Daehin ignored him and inserted the chip into the central control panel. Suddenly, every screen in the chamber blazed to life. More than that, the signal was broadcasting across every public channel in council space. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds were watching. What is this? Vrex stood, his voice booming. This is the truth, Daehin said simply. He pressed a button. The screens filled with data. Communications between council species discussing how to divide unclaimed territories among themselves. Trade agreements that forced minor species to sell resources at fractions of market value. Military protection fees that amounted to extortion. Records of the Maltharian Empire strip mining protectorate worlds. Despite treaties promising sustainable development, the chamber erupted into chaos. This is classified information, a Vescan delegate shouted. It's also true, Daehin replied calmly. Every document is authenticated. Every communication is verified. We've been collecting this for 5 years. More data flashed across the screens. The Council's collective defense. Program was selling weapons to both sides of border conflicts to keep minor species dependent. Elder species were manipulating votes by threatening to withdraw economic support. The entire system was built on exploitation disguised as cooperation. Delegates were shouting now. Some at Daehyun, but many at each other. Species that thought they were allies discovered they'd been undermining each other for decades. Protectorates saw proof that their supposed benefactors were thieves. The carefully maintained facade of council unity was shattering in real time. "Turn this off," Vrex roared. "Security, arrest that human." But Daehyun wasn't done. The final segment of his broadcast began playing. It showed the intercepted communications from 2 weeks ago, the ones where 6 council species had already divided humanity's territory among themselves. The Outer Rim hearing had been a predetermined show trial. The chamber fell silent. Even the angry delegates stopped shouting. This was different. This was proof that the council's justice system was a farce. Daehyun looked up at Vrex. "You asked if we were prepared to accept your terms, Chancellor. Here is humanity's answer. No. We reject your claims to the Outer Rim. We reject your reparations. We reject your probationary status. And effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council." "You cannot," Vrex said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "We already have. All human diplomatic staff are being recalled. All treaties between humanity and the Council are void. Our borders are closed to Council vessels. From this moment forward, we will handle our own affairs." Daehyun's voice was steady, calm, final. "We came here seeking partnership. You offered slavery. We decline." On the screens, the broadcast was still running, showing document after document of council corruption. Daehyun had timed it perfectly. The most damaging information was scrolling past right now, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "This is an act of war." The Torgoth delegate screamed. "No," Daehyun said. "This is an act of honesty. We're simply showing the galaxy what you really are." Vrex's face had gone dark with rage. "You think you can defy us? You think your pathetic fleet can stand against the combined might of the Council? We will crush you for this insolence." Daehyun smiled slightly and gestured to one of the chamber's external view screens. "Captain Park, if you please." Outside Nexus Station, the human fleet suddenly became very visible. The Un's Indomitable and its escort ships powered up their weapons and shields. They weren't attacking. They were simply demonstrating that they were ready. Around them, the 17 Council warships began moving to intercept. Then something unexpected happened. They stopped. Confused orders were being transmitted across multiple channels. Different species commanding different ships, all trying to coordinate a response. And none of them agreeing on what that response should be. "The Council fleet is yours to command, Chancellor," Daehyun said mockingly. "Oh wait, is there a problem? Are they having trouble deciding who's in charge?" On the Indomitable's bridge, Captain Jiwoo Park watched the Council's ships with amusement. "They're getting 3 different sets of orders. The Malthorians want to attack. The Veskin want to blockade. The Torgoth want to wait for authorization from their home fleet." Their unified command just collapsed. The chamber delegates were screaming at each other now. Some were defending their actions, claiming the documents were forged. Others were counterattacking, revealing other species' secrets in revenge. Several delegations simply stood and walked out. Daehyun watched the collapse with grim satisfaction. 20 years of careful diplomacy destroyed in 20 minutes. But it had to be done. The Council wasn't going to reform itself. "You will regret this," Vrex said quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You have made enemies of the entire galaxy." "No," Daehyun replied. "We've exposed the truth. What happens next is up to everyone else." He bowed slightly, more mockery than respect. "Goodbye, Chancellor. Thank you for teaching humanity an important lesson about galactic politics." He turned and walked up the aisle toward the exit. High One was waiting there, her face pale but determined. "The shuttle's ready," she whispered. "Good. Let's go home." Behind them, the council chamber was descending into complete chaos. 3 more species announced immediate withdrawal. Others were demanding investigations. The Maltharian delegation was physically threatening the Veskin representatives. Security forces rushed in to separate them. As Daehyun's shuttle detached from Nexus Station, He watched through the viewport. The station that had represented galactic unity for thousands of years was tearing itself apart. His communication device beeped. It was President Taeyang's status. The president asked, "Bridge burned, sir." "All of them." "Good. Come home, Ambassador. We have work to do." The shuttle joined up with the human fleet, and together they jumped to FTL. Behind them, Nexus Station was already dealing with the fallout. 8 species had announced withdrawal from the Council within the first hour. More would follow. On Earth, people watched the broadcast and felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Their species had stood up to the galaxy's bullies and walked away with dignity intact. In the Outer Rim colonies, 15,000 settlers received the news and cheered. They didn't have to leave. Their homes were safe, and across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, beings saw the truth about the Council and began asking uncomfortable questions of their own. Governments. Daehyun closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of exhaustion. The hard part was just beginning. But for now, humanity was free. 6 months changed everything. The Galactic Council still existed, technically. They still held meetings at Nexus Station. But the chamber was half empty now. 23 species had withdrawn in the first month alone. Others stayed but refused to pay their contributions or follow Council directives. The organization that had governed the galaxy for 3,000 years was dying. Chancellor Rex watched his empire crumble and blamed humanity for everything. It didn't matter that the corruption had existed long before humans arrived. It didn't matter that the system had been rotten at its core. Someone had to pay for his humiliation, and humanity was the perfect target. The Maltharian High Command agreed. A punitive strike would show the galaxy that the Council still had teeth. More importantly, it would show that defying the old order had consequences. They chose their target carefully. The Kepler mining colony in the Outer Rim was isolated, lightly defended, and symbolically important. It was one of the original human settlements that had sparked the territorial dispute. Destroying it would send a clear message. Commander Young-Si Khan had never expected to see combat. He was a logistics officer, good with numbers and supply chains, not warfare. When he'd volunteered for colony duty, he'd imagined quiet years managing or shipments and equipment maintenance. Instead, he was now staring at his console screen, watching for Maltharian battlecruisers drop out of FTL at the edge of the system. "Sir." His second officer, a young woman named Ji-Hai, looked at him with wide eyes. "What do we do?" Young-Sik's mind raced. The colony had 2 corvettes, both currently on patrol on the far side of the system. By the time they arrived, the battle would be over. They had orbital defense platforms, but those were designed to fend off pirates, not military capital ships. "Sound the evacuation alarm," he said quietly. "Get civilians into the shelters. Then get me tactical data on those battlecruisers." The data wasn't encouraging. Each Maltharian ship massed 10 times what his entire defensive force could muster. They had shields strong enough to shrug off his orbital cannons. They had weapons that could crack a planet from orbit. He activated the emergency channel. "This is Commander Han of Kepler Colony to approaching vessels. You are entering human territory. State your intentions." The response came immediately, broadcast on all frequencies so everyone could hear. "This is Captain Revan of the Maltharian Imperial Fleet. Your colony has been declared a military target under Council Security Resolution 379. You have 30 minutes to evacuate all personnel. After that, we will commence bombardment." "There are 1,500 civilians here," Young-Sik said. 30 minutes isn't enough time." "That is not my concern. Kepler Colony is an illegal settlement on disputed territory. Consider this your final warning." The channel closed. Young-Sik looked at his staff. They were terrified, looking to him for answers he didn't have. "Gee, get me system tactical overlay. Include the asteroid field, the gas giant, everything. Then contact the mining fleet and tell them to scatter. They're not to engage, just survive." "Sir, we can't fight for battlecruisers." "I know, but we can make them work for it." Ouch. Young-Sik had spent 3 years managing mining operations. He knew this system better than he knew his own apartment back on Earth. He knew where every asteroid was, every sensor dead zone, every gravitational anomaly. The Malthorians had better ships, but he had home field advantage. Activate all defense platforms. Set them to autonomous mode with targeting priority on weapons systems, not engines. I want to slow them down, not stop them. Then get me control of every mining drone in the system. Mining drones, sir? They're remote operated, full of explosives for breaking up asteroids, and expendable. We're going to turn them into missiles. Over the next 20 minutes, Young-Sik transformed the colony's mining infrastructure into a weapon system. 200 mining drones, each carrying enough explosive to crack a small asteroid, spread out through the system on intercept courses. Cargo haulers were reprogrammed to broadcast false sensor signatures, making it look like the colony had military reinforcements. The orbital platforms began firing at maximum range, not to destroy, but to force the Malthorians to keep their shields up. Captain, Revan watched with amusement as the pathetic human defenses activated, or Biddle cannons that couldn't penetrate his shields. Some cargo vessels trying to look threatening. Was almost insulting how weak they were. Increased speed. Will be in bombardment range in 15 minutes. All weapons, prepare to fire on my command. Then the first mining drone hit. It came out of the asteroid field at a sharp angle. It was too fast and too small for point defense to track properly. It impacted the lead battlecruiser's port shield and detonated. The shield held, but the explosion created a massive electromagnetic pulse that temporarily blinded that quadrant's sensors. 3 more drones hit before the Malthorians even realized what was happening. Then 10, then 20. Evasive maneuvers. Revan shouted, "Where are these coming from?" "Everywhere, sir. They're using the asteroid field for cover." "Our sensors are having trouble tracking them through all the interference." The battlecruisers broke formation, each trying to avoid the swarm of explosive drones. Their superior shields were taking the hits, but the constant impacts were draining their power cells. Worse, they couldn't focus on advancing toward the colony while dealing with the drones. Young-Sik watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. The drones were dying by the dozens, but they were doing their job. The Maltharian formation had scattered, putting them exactly where he wanted them. Launched the cargo haulers. Full thrust toward the gas giant. 3 massive cargo ships, normally used to transport or accelerated toward the system's outer edge. The Malthorians tracked them automatically, assuming they were fleeing. 2 bogies breaking away from the colony, the Maltharian tactical officer reported. Civilian vessels attempting to escape? Ignore them. Revan ordered. Focus on the colony itself. All ships break through this drone screen and assume bombardment positions. But breaking through wasn't easy. Young-Sik had set up the drones in waves. Every time the Malthorians destroyed one group, another wave appeared from a different angle. The asteroid field provided endless cover, and the human commander was using every piece of rock as a weapon. Then the cargo haulers reached the gas giant and executed a perfectly calculated slingshot maneuver. They whipped around the massive planet, using its gravity to accelerate to incredible speeds, and came screaming back toward the battle at vectors the Malthorians never expected. "Sir, those cargo vessels are on a collision course." Revan stared at his screen in disbelief. "They're empty ships. Why would they?" The first hauler slammed into a battlecruiser at a significant fraction of light speed. The shields overloaded instantly. The impact tore through the hull like paper, and the ship's reactor went critical. The explosion took out a second battlecruiser that was too close. The third battlecruiser tried to evade. But Young-Sik had predicted that. Another wave of mining drones forced it straight into the path of the second cargo hauler. That impact. It was less direct, but it still crippled the ship's engines and weapons systems. The last battlecruiser, Revan's flagship, suddenly found itself alone against a swarm of drones and orbital platforms that were now concentrating all their fire on a single target. "Retreat," Revan ordered. "All power to engines. Get us out of." Here Young-Sik watched the surviving battlecruiser jump to FTL and allowed himself to breathe. His hands were shaking. The battle had lasted 40 minutes. 3 Maltharian capital ships destroyed, 1 fleeing in disgrace. Sir Jihai said quietly, "We actually won."
"Are we?"
We survived, Young-Si corrected. That's different, but the galaxy didn't see it that way. Within hours, news of the battle spread across every communications network. Humanity had defeated the Maltharian Imperial fleet. A logistics officer with mining drones had destroyed 3. The Malthorians demanded the Council authorize a full military response, but the votes weren't there. Too many species were questioning whether the Council served their interests. Too many were watching humanity and wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was another way. On Earth, Admiral Haijin Song received the battle reports and smiled. Young-Si had done exactly what humanity did best, improvised. Gay adapted, and won against superior odds. Her communication console beeped constantly now. 12 species wanted to establish diplomatic relations outside the Council framework. 2 former Council hardliners were asking if humanity would be interested in defensive alliances. The galaxy was fracturing, and humanity was at the center of it. Not because they sought power, but because they'd shown others that the old system could be challenged. President Tayan convened his cabinet. We need to decide what comes next. The galaxy is watching us. What kind of power do we want to be? Round the table, faces were serious but determined. Humanity had walked away from the Council. Now they had to build something better. 1 year after the walk away, the galaxy looked completely different. Ambassador Biora Im stood at the window of her office on Kepler Station and watched ships arrive from a dozen different worlds. The station had been rebuilt after the Maltharian attack, bigger and better than before. Now it served as headquarters for something unprecedented. The Kepler Accord, 37 species had signed the agreement, was a defensive alliance but different from anything the galaxy had seen before. No hierarchy, no elder species dictating terms to younger ones. Every member had equal voting rights, contributed proportionally to their capacity, and could leave whenever they wanted. It was revolutionary, and it terrified the old powers. Biora reviewed the day's agenda: trade negotiations between the Veskin Collective and humanity, a petition from 2 new species asking to join the Accord, a presentation on joint military exercises. The work never stopped, but it was good work, building something instead of maintaining something broken. Her father called from Earth. President. Taeyong looked tired but satisfied. How's it going up there? He asked. Busy. We have 3 more species considering membership. The Accord is growing faster than we can process applications. That's what I'm afraid of. We need to make sure we're accepting species for the right reasons, not just collecting members to counter the Council. Biora nodded. I know, we're being careful. But Dad, species are desperate to join. They've seen what we're building, and they want to be part of it. On the other side of the galaxy, Chancellor Vrek sat in a chamber that used to hold hundreds of delegates and now barely filled a quarter of its seats. The Galactic Council was dying, and everyone knew it. Only the most conservative, the most fearful, the most invested in the old system remained. We must act, Vrek said to his inner circle. The Kepler Accord is stealing our members, our credibility, our purpose. If we don't respond, the Council will cease to exist. What do you propose? A Torgoth admiral asked. A final demonstration of power. We assemble a fleet, the largest in a millennium. We go to the Sol system and demand humanity disband their illegal alliance. If they refuse, we destroy them. The galaxy needs to remember who really holds power. The plan took months to organize. 200 warships from 16 different species, all that remained of the Council's military might, was impressive, terrifying, and represented the last gasp of an empire that refused to die quietly. Admiral Haijin Song watched the approaching fleet from her command chair aboard the Unsovereign, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. Around her, the combined human and Accord fleet held position in Sol system. 80 human vessels and 60 ships from allied species. They outnumber us significantly, her tactical officer observed. I know, but numbers aren't everything. Contact all ships. Defensive formation Beta 7. No one fires unless I give the order. Chancellor Vrex led the armada personally, standing on the bridge of his flagship. He'd waited a year for this moment. Humanity had humiliated him, destroyed his carefully constructed system, and now they would pay. "Broadcast on all channels," he ordered. "Let everyone hear this." His message went out across the system. "Humans, you have violated every principle of galactic law. You have stolen council members, undermined legitimate authority, and spread chaos throughout civilized space. You will immediately disband your illegal alliance and submit to council justice. You have 1 hour to comply." On the Sovereign, Hygiene received the message and smiled slightly. "Open a channel to all ships in the system, both fleets." Her response wasn't just to Vrex, it was to everyone. "Chancellor, your council is finished. Not because we destroyed it, but because it was built on a lie. You maintained power by keeping everyone divided and afraid. But people aren't afraid anymore. You've seen that there's another way." "Enough speeches," Vrex snarled. "You have 59 minutes. Then something unexpected happened. Within the council fleet, 37 ships suddenly powered down their weapons. They were vessels from species that had been secretly negotiating with the Accord. Crews who'd finally decided which side of history they wanted to be on. "What is this?" Rex stared at his display in disbelief. "What are you doing?" One of the ship captains responded on the open channel. "Defecting, Chancellor. We're done fighting for a system that never served us. The Kepler Accord has offered us membership, and we're accepting." More ships followed. Within minutes, Vrex's Grand Armada was fracturing before his eyes. Stayed loyal, but many simply broke formation and requested permission to join the Accord fleet. Hyjin watched it happen with quiet satisfaction. They'd been working on this for months, making contact with individual captains, showing them what the Accord represented. Not everyone would defect, but enough would to break Rex's show of force. President Taeyong's face appeared on her screen. "Admiral status. 37 defections and counting, sir. The Council fleet is in chaos. Can we end this without firing a shot?" "I think we already have." Vrex stared at the chaos around him. His fleet was dissolving in real time. Species he'd commanded for decades were abandoning him. The carefully planned demonstration of strength had become a humiliating display of weakness. He could still order an attack. He had enough loyal ships to do serious damage, maybe even win the battle. But at what cost? How many of his own former allies would he have to kill? And what would victory prove except that he was willing to slaughter anyone who disagreed with him? Chancellor's tactical officer said quietly. "We should withdraw." "No," Vrex said. But his voice lacked conviction. President Tyan's voice came across the channel, then calm and measured. "Chancellor Vrex, you can fight. Maybe you'll win. But look at what's happening. Your own people are leaving you. Not because we forced them, but because we offered them something better. Partnership among equals. That's all we ever wanted. You destroyed the council," Vrex said. "No, we exposed it. There's a difference." Taeyong paused. "The galaxy is moving on, Chancellor. You can move with it or be left behind. Your choice?" For a long moment, Vrex said nothing. Then finally, he gave the order. "All ships, return to home territories. We're done here." The remaining council fleet withdrew, jumping to FTL in scattered groups. It wasn't an organized retreat. It was a collapse. On Kepler Station, Biora watched the news feeds and felt tears in her eyes. They'd done it. Without firing a shot, they'd ended the Council's grip on the galaxy. The aftermath was chaotic. Within 3 months, the Galactic Council officially dissolved. Most remaining members joined either the Kepler Accord or formed their own democratic federations. The age of enforced hierarchy was over. Species that had been subjugated for centuries declared independence. Trade networks reorganized around fair exchange instead of exploitation. Military alliances formed based on mutual benefit, not intimidation. It wasn't perfect. The galaxy was messier now, more unpredictable. But it was also freer. 5 years later, Daehai and Kim sat in his home in Busan and watched the sunset over the ocean. He was retired now. His diplomatic career ended with that famous walkaway. But young people still sought him out. Wanting to understand what had happened, a graduate student named Ji Won-an sat across from him with a recording device. "Ambassador Kim, when you broadcast that evidence and walked out of the council chamber, Did you know what would happen? Dahan smiled. I knew the council was built on lies. I knew they'd kept power by making everyone believe the system was unbeatable. And I knew that once people saw the truth, once they realized they didn't have to be afraid, everything would change. But you couldn't have predicted it would work this well. No, he admitted. I thought we'd end up fighting a war. Maybe losing, but we had to try. Because staying in that system, accepting their terms, would have been a slower death. At least this way we died standing. Except you didn't die. We didn't. Dahan looked out at the ocean. We walked away instead. Turns out, that's the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to control you. Just refuse to play their game. Ji-won turned off her recorder. One more question, off the record. Was it worth it? All the chaos, all the uncertainty, all the danger? Dahan thought about Kepler Colony, still thriving. About the Accord, growing stronger every year. About the dozens of species that were now free to chart their own course. About his daughter Biora, building the kind of galaxy he'd always hoped existed. Yes, he said simply. It was worth it. The galaxy was messy now, full of competing interests and occasional conflicts. But it was also full of possibility. Species were talking to each other as equals, trading freely, forming alliances based on friendship instead of fear. New ideas were flourishing, old grievances were being resolved. The future was unwritten. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They'd just shown everyone else that the old way of doing things wasn't inevitable. That courage and honesty could change everything. That's sometimes. The bravest thing you can do is simply walk away from a bad situation and build something better. And in the end, that was the most human thing of all.